Jesus wanted them to understand when people walk away from God, when we throw our inheritance in God's face, it's my life. It is that complete separation from the religion and the culture and everything that seems right and everything that seems good. And we can say, well, I can think of things a lot worse, Chris. Well, in this culture, this was probably one of the worst things that young son could ever do. So the depth of sin and separation was massive between the father and the son. And Jesus told it that way on purpose. A few days later, the younger son gathered everything he had and traveled to a distant country. Not only did he want it all, but he left. I don't care about our name. I don't care about our property. I'm out of here. And there he wasted his fortune in reckless and immoral living. Now, when he had spent everything, a severe famine occurred in that country, and he began to do without and be in need. Suddenly he ran out of all that he had. So he went and forced himself on one of the citizens of that country and went to him in his fields to feed pigs. Again, this is a Jewish person feeding pigs. Pigs were considered one of the most disgusting, vile creatures you could ever be around. To work with them made you disgusting and vile. It was the bottom of the bottom, the end of himself. He would have gladly eaten the pods that the pigs were eating, but they did not satisfy his hunger. So not only was he around pigs, but he was willing to eat their food. You talk about the bottom of the barrel. And no one was giving anything to him. But when he finally came to his senses, he said, how many of my father's hired men have more than enough food while I'm dying here of hunger? I will get up and go to my father, and I will say to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and in your sight. I'm no longer worthy to be called your son. Just treat me like one of your hired men. He got his speech ready. He got his, Dad, I've screwed up. He had planned it all out. I'm going to come back still having his plan in hand. So he got up and he came to his father. But while he was still a long way off, his father saw him and was moved with compassion for him and ran and embraced him and kissed him. And then when he didn't just see him and say, hey, he's coming, get everything ready. The father ran. And again, I've shared this before. For the father to run means more than likely he had to kick off his sandals, pull up his robe, both of which in that culture were absolutely embarrassing and you didn't do. Kicking off his sandals was like taking off his authority. Pulling up his robe was like being rude and shameful. But it didn't matter because his son was finally looking toward home. And the father ran to him, embraced him. You just embraced a sinner. You embraced a young man that technically should be stoned to death. And then he kissed him, which restored him to the family. And again, as I've shared this statement before, there's a word called kazaza, which is to take upon himself, the father took upon himself all the shame, all the punishment, all the hatred of the people around because they would see this happening and probably think the father was running to stone his son to death. But instead, his father brought him back into the family. We cannot be those who constantly point and condemn the unsaved. We have to be those who go and as they turn to God, bring them in, love them, and point them to the Father. We, the church, have to be about seeking and saving the lost with the heart of the Father in us.